So this week we will make diorama of Venusaur that is summoned by cultists, so let's begin. At the beginning, as always, I had to create some wire armature for Venusaur, and here I decided to create only half of it because it is going to move through portal. When I have already prepared this armature, it was time to slap some clay. In the beginning I was not focusing so much about detail because I just wanted to create some sketch and apply decent amount of clay, and when I decided it was okay, I moved with head. For head I took a piece of clay and was checking if the proportions are okay, and then it was time to move on with sculpting. Head or faces are actually one of my favorite parts in sculpting because it gives personality to the sculpture, and also you can show some expression through it. Like for example cocky smile that I tried to achieve with Stratos and sadly failed with that. Anyway, before moving to more detailed work, I wanted to create more fatty throat for this boy to have kinda froggy look. Okay, let's move on finally to this Dumbo head. Here I applied actually normal tongue and then moved with teeth. For this purpose I'm using already heated clay because it's much easier to operate, and created some gums to look more decent. Now let's move on with eyes. To be honest, at the beginning it was quite hard to get symmetrical look of these eyes, and in the end I didn't have the perfect symmetry, but well, not everything has to be perfect. And to be honest, with ears I was not convinced at the beginning because it looks so weird when he was without his leaves, but later it will be better, trust me. So off camera I polished his face, and now time to move on with his flower, and my little improvement here was adding big skull that is going to be in the middle of this flower. I wanted it to look like Venusaur defeated some kind of titan and carrying his skull like a trophy. Well, after this detail it was time to move on with Venus skin. I wanted it to look a little bit froggy, so decided to move on with porous texture. For this purpose I used tool with ball in the end and just stabbed him 1000 times to get this effect. Now time for hands or paws, I don't know. Anyway, it is more or less same process as with teeth. I'm using here some hardened clay and just put it on its place. And final touch for skin was to add some bubbles to look like infection. So let's move on with leaves. It's actually nothing complicated, just flat piece of clay shaped into leaf. Same stuff I did with this purple tree or flower. And when it was finished and I throw him into oven to get hard, meanwhile I did some chains for him because later I have plans for it. And also before we move with painting I mixed already resin to use as a portal later. I did it now because it has to cure anyway for 2 days, so it was better to already prepare it. Let's go with painting now. To be honest, painting this guy was pure pleasure because he have big parts and actually all of them fits perfectly together with color scheme. So that was actually quick painting because I could use a lot of times airbrush, and in the end I was really satisfied with results because it looks so cool and is going to be even better with diorama. So let's go with diorama finally. To create walls I glued together plastic planks, and after that used some air drying clay to create brick. I want to make some kind of dungeon or underground for cultists where they sacrifice people for glorious Venusaur. Anyway, when clay was drying I took out this resin portal and polished it to look nice and shiny. Next day, when clay was dry, it was time to glue it to the walls, and after that move on with floor. To create it I used a lot of wooden sticks. Sorry for the color madness, but I finally wanted to use these sticks because they were laying for almost 1 year in a closet. And for second wall I threw just hundreds of tiny stones and sand. And when glue was drying I secured resin and glued around it bigger stones to create some sort of pocket where I can put this disc of resin. Finally time for our victim and cultist from clay. For the victim I wanted to make some old fart because I thought that someone as big as Venusaur would like some juicy fatty meat. And also it was much easier to sculpt fat guy instead of someone bulky or skinny. With cultist it's also actually easy because after making wire skeleton I just slap on some flat parts of clay and that's all. So after this too I made off camera some furnitures and details to make this diorama much better. Diorama primed with spray can, so let's move on with painting, and again I'm using here airbrush because it's better to work with it when you have such big surface. But after base coat I move on with dry brushing because this is the best technique to paint something if you want to make it look old or weathered, like these bricks for example. Other parts of wall I am painting with ivory, cause I want to have some variety on this wall to not look so boring. And the floor I painted more or less same way as bricks, just with different color. You know, base color, later dry brushing, and later that finishing other details of this creepy diorama. At the end some oil wash to gain nice contrast and also extra weathered look. When it's dry I am adding of course some dry pigments, because nothing adds better dirty look than dry pigments. After diorama it was of course time for these two guys, also nothing complicated, so that was quick and joyful painting. Now last part, and actually main part. With Portal I have to admit I was quite stressful because didn't have any precise plan about it, so what you see now is more or less improvising. To create vines I used thread and lines that I put into paint and pigments mixed with PVA glue, so they will get hard after drying, and just apply them randomly all over the portal to cover lights and shape of this resin. After that I applied some PVA glue in few places and dropped randomly static grass with different colors to have some variety, and when it was drying I made off camera some leaves from clay to make these vines look more interesting. Finally time to put chains that I made already long time ago, and that you probably already forget about that, but they are back, and I think they adding a lot of nice story to the diorama. And when he is chained up I gave some effect of blood. For this purpose I'm just spreading red ink and later applying mixed uhu glue with this red ink to create gross look of blood. Time for main hero of this diorama. I just use epoxy glue to put him on portal and chained him up later. Applying water effect gel for this portal to won't look so flat. After that connecting wires, painting sides with black, and we can call him done. So that's all for this video, I hope you enjoyed it and I see you in another one. Bye!